Before we begin today's episode of So Chatty, a couple of things I need to explain. This was all planned out, all laid out, and we intended to do the show you how to put the bottom on the bag, get the bag stitched up, make the lining, make the handles, and then next week we were going to do the assembly of the final bag. And then things went terribly wrong, as you will see. So please bear with us. We will make things better next week. But in the meantime, the reason I didn't scrap this whole video was because I want to show you the mistakes you can have, especially if you're, well, even if you're not new to making bags. Sometimes your mind races ahead and it doesn't go down the right track. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter for So Chatty for episode number 177 for March the 7th, 2025. And today we're going to continue our series on making an in-the-hoop bag. And I'm going to warn you, there is going to be gnashing of teeth because we've been over the instructions. And these instructions, I'm going to tell you right now, are horribly written when it comes to assembling the bag. This is a sweet pea design, as you know. And you know, I have bought many sweet pea designs. We should be looking up at the camera up there. Sorry if we're looking down because it's a different position than we usually do. I have bought many sweet pea designs in the past, never had a problem with them. The last three that I have done from sweet pea, they're horribly written. And you'll understand why in a moment because I'll be reading some of them to you. And completely confusing, especially if you're a beginner and you've never done an in-the-hoop bag. I have written to the company about this a couple of times, no acknowledgement, nothing. I guess they think they're just really perfect and that we don't know what we're doing. So I still like their designs. I will still buy from them, but we are experienced in the hoop people and we can usually get around their instructions, usually. So having said that, before we get into this, let's talk about my ugly orphan quilt, I call it, and I just have to find the right switch for this. So this I worked on this week. It's called the Ugly Orphan Quilt or the Orphan Ugly Quilt, whichever way you want to put it. Whichever way you want to put it, it's ugly. So I had this idea that, well, I just wasn't in the mood to sew something from a pattern or something like that. And I have all these orphan blocks that I save all the time. And I thought, I'll throw some of these together, make them into a quick quilt. Well, of course, to get everything to fit together, you got to put in coping strips and stuff like that. And that's what I did. And this is what I ended up with. And this is the top. What am I going to do with this ugly thing? Well, the colors are pretty, but it's ugly. I will quilt it, though, someday. I might use it to practice setting up the long arm for doing custom quilting, maybe in each of the blocks, things like that. We'll see how that turns out. Then it can be either a dog blanket or I could give it to a cat shelter or something like that. Cut it down, make it into a pillow. I don't know, something like that. But it is bloody ugly. And I was saying to myself as I was working on this is bloody ugly. So anyways, yeah, that's what I worked on this week. And yeah, back to what we're really going to show you. Okay, so you see our little heads are chopped off a bit, but we won't be in this position for long. All right, so some announcements. Sewing with Stephanie and Stephen Wednesdays as usual. You know the drill. Links in the show notes. But this Saturday coming, March the 8th, 2025, I am having a Idiot Quilter pop-up sew day. Everybody is welcome. Link is in the show notes for that as well. And do make sure that you click on the pop-up sew day, not Sewing with Stephanie and Stephen for that, because they're both listed. They're very clearly written out. Make sure you hit the right one because, well, we have a few people sometime who get really mad at me and saying, you never answered me. You didn't hit the right link. So read for that. And I'm just looking at my notes right now and I realize I haven't put the link in the show notes here, but they will be in when you see this. Okay. Anything else coming up? No. Oh, for those of you that are wondering whether Walter will be making an appearance on the pop-up sew day, the answer to that is
no. Why? I'm going to my in-person Tote at the club.
Oh, and what are you going to be working on?
Probably a shirt.
Okay, probably a shirt. So I'm sorry for Walter's fan club. He won't be here. I know. Big alligator tears, crocodile tears, whatever the expression is. All right, let's get on with this today. Okay, so we're making this quilted patchwork bag in the hoop. And last couple of weeks, you've seen how to stitch out the panels. And I'm going to switch my camera down here so you can see this a little better. Okay, so here you go. Here's one of the panels. Both panels look exactly the same, front and back. So those are stitched together. We did that last week. What we're going to work on today is the first thing we're going to do is put the bottom on, which is fairly straightforward. So far, the instructions were relatively clear about this. We're going to be using faux leather. And this is the color I have picked for the bottom of my bag. It's relatively thin, but it's good quality because where did we get it?
We got it at Emmeline Bags.
Oh yes, Emmeline Bags. They have a really great selection.
Yeah, it is actually, I forget what kind of faux leather it was called.
There's kinds of faux leather?
Yeah, it was a brand name.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, we got some. Now, in the instructions, they tell you to cut a piece 13 and a half by 7 inches. 13 and a half this way, 7 inches this way. So I have. And you're supposed to line it up right side of your faux leather on the right side of your front bag panel and then clip it. Now you will notice that this is a rectangle, but the sides of our bag are sloped. Don't let that phase you out. That's perfectly all right. What you want to do is line up the bottom of your piece of faux leather with the bottom of the bag and then clip it.
It's called Mora faux leather.
More for them. And how much was it?
It was $13.99, and you get a piece that is, I think, half a yard by, is it 54 inches?
54 inches.
Width.
I don't know. What's it tell you the width is? It comes on a roll.
It's 55. It's 18 inches by 55-inch pieces.
Okay.
That you get.
And it's $13.99.
And $13.99 Canadian.
Yeah. So, what was I talking about before Walter found that upset? Okay, so I've got this piece all lined up here, as you can see, and I've clipped it. Can you pin it? You probably could, but you want to avoid putting holes in the leatherettes. It's kind of like leather too. You don't want to put a lot of holes in it. So just clip it. And then what the instructions tell you to do is take it to your sewing machine, sew it from this side, because remember the little red stitch line that goes all the way around that we put in when we stitch this? That's going to be our guide for sewing this. We're only going to be sewing at the bottom. So the red line is here. They say to stitch it at about a half an inch. Well, where that red line is approximately a half an inch. It might be slightly more, but you want to sew just on the inside of that red line. So I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine. I'm going to do that, and then I'll bring it back and tell you what we're going to do next. Okay, so we've got the bottom sewn to the two panels, the front and the back, and I've got it turned with the face down, right side down, so you can see it. So we stitched half an inch in, which is just beyond the red line slightly on that side, and we did the same on this side. So the two pieces are now joined to the bottom, and if you turn it over to give it a finishing touch, they recommend it that we do a top stitch along each of these seams here in it. Now, I forgot to tell you what kind of needle that we're using. We're using a Microtex needle. Microtex needles are very sharp, and they are a little bit thinner, so that when it's punching holes in your faux leather or leather, they don't show up as readily. I also used a dark brown thread in both my bobbin and in my top for this piece. because I really didn't want my top stitching to be that noticeable. I thought about using the invisible thread, but I'm not sure how well it would hold up to something like this, so I didn't bother with it. It might be okay. All right, so those two pieces are together. Now you would think we're going to sew these together now and have a bag. No, 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 we're not. Because now we're going to put our attention to the lining. Now, let's just put that off to the side for a second. And the lining, I've already pre-cut, rough cut a piece of fabric. They suggested that you cut this piece of fabric at 19 inches by 31.5 inches. I'm using a batik, so I don't have to worry about right side or wrong side on this, but also because I thought, well, it's kind of pretty, and it was sitting in my stash. So, is this the point where I want to direct you to how these instructions are written poorly? Yes. Okay. I have my piece of fabric here. And as I said, 19 inches this way by 31.5 this way. That's more than enough that I need. And that's okay if it's a little bigger right now because we're going to be cutting it. But what they want you to do first of all is to take it and fold it in half. Just like so. So we have a seam down here at the bottom. And then take your scissors and cut along that seam. So essentially what you have are two pieces of fabric. Now this can always get a little hairy. I'm going to take it over to the ironing pressing station for a minute because there's a couple little wrinkles in this. I want to get them out first. And I'm just using the iron to give a crease on the bottom. It'll make it easier for cutting. So take my scissors. This is a little awkward on camera. Stick them in between the two. Oops, went a little off.
I was going to say, why don't you just...
What? I know, I probably could have used just the rotary cutter on it. It does. This is, I have more fabric here than I actually need, so it's not going to cause me grief. There's always a better way to do these things. Okay, I've got my fabric cut in half. Now what they would like you to do, just leave them that way. They say to pin it or clip it, and I like to use my clips. And you're going to sew it along the bottom edge, but you're going to leave about a 7-inch gap here in the middle. You're not going to bother sewing it up the sides yet, I don't believe, are we?
No.
It's that. So put in a couple of clips along here. Actually, there's where probably I'll start my opening. Remember that. And end the opening. And then you're just going to sew, and they say 1/2 inch. Everything is in 1/2 inch with their patterns, which sometimes you can get mixed up because as quilters, we're used to doing 1/4 inch on things. So I'm going to sew a straight line down here. I'm going to stop. When I come down, when I start here, and when I end here, I'm going to back stitch. Actually, it doesn't really matter here so much because that will get buried in the seam allowance. But I'm going to back stitch here a couple of stitches, and I'm going to back stitch when I start here again and finish to the end. And the reason I'm doing that is because this hole that we're creating in this, eventually the whole bag will go through that one hole. And so that puts a lot of stress on your fabric, and your stitches may break. If they do, you can usually stitch it up without too much of a problem. But if you back stitch at each one of these parts, if you remember to, many times I don't remember to, then it just reinforces it a little bit, so less chance of it breaking. Less chance. It probably still will. But so I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'll come back when I've got that done for the next step. Okay, so I've sewn the two pieces together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I have pressed open sort of the seam that's here. Here's my opening. You know, you don't need to get too uptight about how this looks because It's not going to be seen. It's all going to get turned inside out. It'll work. It's a mystery, but it'll work. Now they want you to actually cut the lining out. This is the lining. So it's the same size as your bag. And they're saying to take this bottom part, the center of the bottom part, and line it up with the hole. So the hole's in the center, sort of thing, roughly.
Yeah.
Close enough is good. Then they want you to pin this around so that we can cut all the way around. So we're using basically the bag panels as our template for the lining. So we're going to put some pins in this. You might be wondering what Walter's job is to do. He's being
I'm
eagle-eyed.
overseeing.
He's overseeing.
I am telling Steve when he's doing the wrong seam allowance.
Like, yeah, you remember how I told you that they want you to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance on that lining? Well, I immediately went in and did a 1/4 inch or started. And Walter caught it. Part of the problem is, and I haven't talked about what feet to use with this. I'm get very lazy. I usually have my 1/4 inch foot on my sewing machine all the time for obvious reasons. I'm a quilter. That's what we use, right? And I hate changing my feet. Not that it's hard. I just, eats up my time. So
You've got a wrinkle here. I think.
what?
Okay, I guess it's okay. Don't worry.
I'll fix it.
Hmm.
The overseer said there was a little bit of a. These are a bitch. These are not the pins I should be using. I should use these ones. These ones.
Actually, you're putting in way more pins than you need to.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Because I've cut out lots of patterns.
I pinned it to the pattern. Oh, okay.
Actually, okay. You just need a couple of pins to keep it in place.
Here, you pin. You pin. You pin. Let's have Walter do something. Let Walter pin. Ooh, look at the expertise of that. He's a pinner from way back. Get it in.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough?
You might want to pin.
Okay. So you're doing such a good job of the pinning. I think you could do an equally good job of the trimming.
Mm.
Because this is just like making a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you got scissors there.
I want a rotary cutter. I don't want scissors.
Oh, well, there's a rotor cutter right here.
I need a. Do you have a 45?
Not handy.
I don't like using a 60.
No, picky. I
can go upstairs and get my rotary cutter.
You may have to, because the only 45 that I've got is this one.
Okay, let me get mine.
Okay, we'll put this on pause while you're getting your rotary cutter. Things and things.
Okay, so I like using a smaller rotary cutter because it's a little easier to go around curves. So
while he's doing this, just to let you know, Walter's working on this bag too in a different colorway, but he's a little behind in getting his pieces together. But we will eventually come to it and see it, and we may do a little bit of a recording of Walter doing a few things with the bag, more or less as a review of how to do this.
this is how I cut out a shirt.
Yeah, I know. I don't cut out shirts. I only cut out the one. Yeah, I guess the rotary cutter lets you get in with the curves better than a pair of scissors. But if you're good with scissors, it doesn't really matter. Whatever gets you through, I guess. So you definitely want a large space for cutting this.
There should be the other side.
And it's a very tense moment here, people, on the cutting mat, as all eyes are on Walter as he rotary cuts the bag lining. When was the last time you changed your blade?
A little while ago, I need to put a new blade in.
A sharp blade in your rotary cutter for this kind of thing really helps. Then you don't have to do what Walter's doing right now. Chew through the fabric.
Come on.
Put a little pressure on it, man.
You don't have to watch me do this whole thing.
No, true. It is kind of boring. It's like watching paint dry, but you get the point. We'll come back. Okay, so Walter's cut out the lining, so we need to detach the lining from the outside of the bag. So we're taking out our pins. Make sure we have them all out. And so there is our bag lining. We're going to set that aside because in the next set of instructions, we are going to sew up the sides of the bag. Now, what they say to do, it says, join the front and the back of the bag. Fold the back of the bag on top of the front of the bag with right sides together. Pin along the sides of the bag and along the bottom of the bag. So they want right sides together. So essentially, we're folding it in half, lining up the top pieces. Now, I don't know why they say this, though. Pin along the sides of the bag and along the bottom of the bag. And they're showing clips. Oh, I guess you are going to sew down. But if you do that, you won't have anywhere to do the box corner.
Yeah, remember they cut off the box corner down at the bottom. Well, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I know. This is where it gets very confusing. But I have a little handy dandy little ruler right here. And this ruler is called the Box Bag Template, and it's by Carol Anna Moore. And it will allow you, and we'll show you how this works, to cut your little squares out to put the corners together. But I don't know why they want us to sew. So they're showing stitching right down in here. Okay, you could do that because when we cut out the square, we'll be cutting out that stitching. It's there. So, okay, it will work. Now, here's the trick. We have to line this all up.
Shouldn't you line it up with your red?
Yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pin it, but I'm going to pin it the way that we have shown you how we pin tiles together by putting pins in. And I'm going to take this over to my mat, and I think I am still, am I in the shot? No, if I change the camera over, cutting area, there. Now, I think what we'll do is I'll have Walter do this on my cell phone camera so you can get up close and personal with it.
Cool.
All right. So we're over here on my pressing mat. It's a wool pressing mat. This works really well when you're pinning things together because it acts like a giant pin cushion. So I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to find the corner. Now I'm taking the outside line that was stitched by the embroidery machine. I'm putting it in. Am I going to take the outside or am I going to take the inside? No, I'm going to take the inside. That red line, red stitch line that we had sew before. We're using that as our guide. And I'm putting it through the corner of that, and I'm finding this white line that's all the way around of stitching, and I'm going to put the pin right in.
Just a sec. Go take a look at your pin with the pins going out of that hole.
Out of this hole?
Yeah. Of where it's, if it's in the right spot.
Oh, that's weird. So it is the outside one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it is the outside one. This is something in the instructions they don't tell you to do. This is something we've learned from trial and error. Yeah, so it should be the outside line. Yeah, so now it's in there, and that has to match up with that one. Okay, See, that's why Walter corrects me. Okay, and make sure your pin is fairly straight. I'm just going to do that again. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay. And I'm going to put the pin down in this bottom corner. No, actually, I'm not. Because
there may be a slight variance in when you've put the panels together too.
Yeah. So actually, as long as those two are lined up, I'm okay. There's going to be a little excess here, but that's all going to get buried in the seam allowance.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look for clips. I'm going to pick some clips now. Now we're not going to be sewing up in here.
No.
We're leaving that open.
So otherwise you'd sew your bag shut.
Yeah,
right?
you sew your bag shut and you have a little problem then. But I'm putting the clips in there. It's just for extra stability. My philosophy is you can never have too many clips and pins. Okay, now I have a question. They told us to sew, was going to be sewing just inside the red line in here like we did on the bottom. And they want you to sew down here. So I guess I need to go straight.
Yeah, I don't know.
That doesn't.
I usually cut my corners out of my bag before I sew.
Before you do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we should do too, because that doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to me in the diagram, because then we would have this seam, and when you turn
Because the way they have it in their instructions. It's like you sew all the way down, and then you cut out the corner.
Yeah. Which is a method. Like basically, you would be taking this but I'm going to use the little square thing, but I'm going to leave it clipped first of all, and I'm going to take it. I have to take it back to the cutting mat. Okay. And so I want to show you how we use that. So I'm going to have Walter do this right now on the camera. So you need to reposition yourself.
Okay.
Okay, here's the confusion with these instructions. I said before, these are very confusing. What they show is, once you've got it's wrong page. Where's it? 26. Oh, 27. Oh, no, where's 27? 27.
Yeah, they show you sewing down the sides,
down
right?
the sides,
all the way down to the bottom of the bag,
and then down the bottom of the bag.
And then they've got show this the corner.
The corner for making a box corner.
Yeah.
And they're showing that you somehow, they say, now with the bag still wrong side out, push the bottom corner out using your scissors, clip the corner so you can open the seam flat.
Huh?
Yeah. And their pictures, even though they're actual pictures, they don't show. So they show a line across here that they have drawn. But now they say place clips or pins in the bottom border to keep it in place. Use your ruler to mark a 45-degree angle along the edge. Okay, 45-degree angle, and they've got a red line. Well, aren't they just following the edge of that and in a straight line down the middle? What's this 45? I guess that's 45 degrees in there. Very confusing. How far in you draw the line will decide how deep your bottom will be. We chose to make it 2 inches from each side. Use a pencil to draw a line. So they're showing 2 inches across here.
It says 2 inches on each side. Well, if you have 2 inches on each side, that you have a 4-inch bottom. But on there, they're showing you 2 inches across, which would give you a 2-inch bottom. I don't think you have enough. I don't think you have enough fabric to get a 4-inch bottom.
Now, I don't think that's what they mean. I think they mean 2 inch, because I'm now going to go, we're scrapping these because these are very confusing. What we're going to do is use that special ruler that I just showed you. And if you look at this ruler, it has this cutout here, and there's inches, whatever. And they're saying 2 inches, which makes sense to me. So what you do is you take this ruler and you position your 2-inch mark at the base of your bottom of your bag and a 2-inch up at the top. And you're going to cut this out. Now this ruler is made so that there's extra little indents, little holes beyond, so that your rotary cutter can get in there. And this is when you do probably want to use a 45 rotary cutter, although I usually use a 60. So probably should have used a 60. So I'll have to take my scissors. Finish that cut. Okay, so I've got that cut out, and I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Take one of those clips out of there. So, all right, so 2-inch marking there, the 2-inch marking at the top. Now, you don't need the ruler to do it this way. You could just mark it off with a regular ruler too. So the theory here is, once we get this side sewn up, both of these sides up to here, then we can take this, that'll be one piece, and we'll be able to collapse them in. Uh-oh. I'm not sure that's going to work. Yeah, it's going to work. Okay. Yeah.
That's how you do a bag.
Yep. I'm having a panic moment there. Okay, so we'll come back after I've sewn down on both of these. And I'm sewing just inside of our little red guideline, stitch line. Okay, so we have sewn down both of these sides inside of the line. So now we're going to box the corners, and we've got our corners cut out. So all you do is you take this and you flatten it out the best way you can so that you don't have any bulk in these corners. Yes, you're going to have this little piece that's going to stick out. Try not to, but it's...
Should be actually what you should do is you should what do you call it? Open your seams on the edges when you you should iron them so that they're open.
What, these are open?
Your seam is open. It's easier for you to push the bag together.
Okay, we'll try that. Okay, so Walter went upstairs and got his point press. That's what you call it, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to press those seams.
Because when I do a shirt, there's a lot of seams that I have to press open. And this allows me to do it. Now, you can use a piece of wood, too. If you have a little piece of wood hanging around, you can use that instead. It's just so that you can insert it into your item, right? And for this one, it's hard to open these seams because the bag's kind of bulky. So if you've got this point press, you can push your seams down onto the wood. It's still a little awkward, but it's easier to do it.
Now, the reason we're doing it this way is to, actually, I have never done it this way. This comes from Walter's Garment Sewing Days. The reason we're doing this is so when we box the corners, it'll be a little easier to line them up. You saw the difficulty I was having getting it lined up a few minutes ago before we did this. So this would make this a little easier, I'm hoping. Probably be a good idea to get a piece of wood or to invest in one of these point things if you're going to do a lot of bag making, especially in the hoop type. But they're probably good for other things.
Actually,
too.
this one is a combination point press and clapper.
So there you go. You get a 2-for-1. Are they expensive?
They're both $40 Canadian, so they're probably about $30 American.
So worth the investment, probably. Do I own one?
This one is from Cleaner Supply or Wawak or whatever company which is an American company.
So if you just go to one of those companies and put in what you call it, a point press?
Either, yeah, point press, Cleaner Supply or Wawak, or a sewing a garment store will have them as well. One that caters to garments. You might be able to find it in a quilting store. I don't know.
Yeah, quilting stores might have.
It's for like when I do collars and things like that. I have to press the seams open.
Now, this is not something that was in the instructions. We're going a little bit beyond the instructions. And don't be afraid to do that. If you've got a method that works good for you.
I didn't press this open because this is the fake leather.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't want to put heat on the fake leather. We're not sure how it will react.
This should
make
it a little easier.
So we'll take it back and we'll try the box. Okay, so we've got the corners boxed. We haven't sewn them yet. We'll admit this was not easy. This is a bit tricky getting everything in there and getting it even. So you probably won't get it perfectly even, but as long as you get it pretty close, if there's a little bit of a bulge in it, when you sew it down, we're going to sew in about a 1/2 inch from that edge, just straight across, it'll gather it up, and it shouldn't be any problem. It shouldn't be, but we'll see. And I notice I don't like one way that you've got it clipped, but
yeah, okay.
I will sew it and we'll come back. Okay, we made a little tiny error. When I was cutting out the corners, I didn't cut far enough in on one piece, and that's why we weren't getting things to lay nice and flat like they do now. So I needed to take off a little 1/2 inch in there, and that makes everything line up the way it's supposed to line up. So now we can sew the bottom. Okay, so there is the bag. There is the bottom. It is wrong. I cut off too much when we were making the points because you're supposed to, if you look at the picture, have part of the bottom, part of the bottom is supposed to come up from the top. But I made the bottom too big, so it doesn't. Oh yeah, it would still work as a bag. And I'm going to finish it, but not today. But Walter has his in reserve. So next week, we're going to do this again. And we're going to show you the right way to do it. Okay, so stay tuned for that. But you want to know something? This is probably a good learning lesson, because that's what happens when you take too much off from the bottom. It looks nice. And I mean, the overall bag is a little smaller. It's a little bit more square.
It has a bigger bottom.
It has a bigger bottom. But I mean, once it gets handles and that, it's still a bag. Okay? It's just not the way that they wanted it. But yeah, I'm an idiot. I've made these kind of things before. I've never used faux leather on the bottom, but that's not really the factor. The factor is
but it was actually confusing to we changed their instructions and how they were doing it. Maybe when I do the bag, I'll try and follow their instructions.
See what you figure out.
Because if you get the same instructions, really, we should be showing you how they do it, follow their directions.
Can't get everything in this shot here, but anyway, so that's what we'll be doing next week. So we're a little bit behind because today I thought we'd do this and we would do the lining, and I would show you how to do the handles, and then next week we'd do the whole assembly. Well, we've got another week yet to go. We'll do it right next week. So, imparting some tips. 1, analyze your instructions very, very, very carefully, especially these ones that came from Sweet Pea. They're very confusing. And they're confusing for another reason that I didn't point out earlier. The grammar is bad, is really bad in this set of instructions in this. Very confusing in the way they have written it. So obviously they don't go through, what do they call, a tech editor for their instructions. And yeah, maybe it's better if you've never made a bag before. Then you don't try to second guess what the instructions are all about, because that's what we were doing. And well, this will work, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. So, anything left to talk about this week? I think I did talk about using Microtex needles because we're using faux leather. And yeah, that's about it. So, maybe next week we'll have better success. Thanks for putting up with us this week, and we'll see you later. Say goodbye, Walter.
Goodbye.